Good afternoon, everyone. I'll call this regularly scheduled meeting of the Ways and Means Committee to order. I'm the chair of the committee, Councilmember Wasami, and we are joined by Council members Fletcher, Johnson, and Palmisano, and we're a quorum of the committee and can therefore conduct the committee's business. Today on the consent agenda, we have 30 items for your consideration, and the items are as follows. The item number 1 is a legal settlement claim of Perry Ebner. Item number 2 is a legal settlement claim of Patricia Grant. Item number 3 is a legal settlement claim of Thomas Burnley. Item number 4 is a legal settlement claim of Thomas Olin. Item number 5 is a legal settlement claim of Lawrence P. Lonsfoot. Item number 6 is a legal settlement claim of Loroso Turner. Item number 7 is a contract amendment with the Center for Energy and Environment for building benchmarking and disclosure services. Item number 8 is a contract amendment with Messenger Construction Company, Inc. for contract closeout of the Guard Shack Replacement Project. Item number 9 is a contract with Life Tech Services for emergency medical services at the Minneapolis Convention Center. Item number 10 is an amendment to the membership agreement with Northside Economic Opportunity Network for shared workspaces at 1007 West Broadway Avenue. Item number 11 is a contract amendment with Clever Designs for additional analysis and design work on the Impound Lot Improvement Project. Item number 12 is amending the settlement amount for the partial acquisition of 2547 5th Street Northeast from Acorn Mini Storage for the East Side Storage and Maintenance Facility Project. Item number 13 is acquisition of 2651 University Avenue Northeast from the Fuller Avenue Estates LLC for the East Side Storage and Maintenance Facility Project. Item number 14 is a contract amendment with Wilson Development Services LLC for tenant relocation services, also for the East Side Storage and Maintenance Project. Item number 15 is a contract with Pi Consulting and Engineering for building enclosure commissioning services for the Consolidated Office Building Project. Item number 16 is a contract with DLR Group, Inc. for furniture, fixtures, and equipment design consulting services for the Consolidated Office Building Project. Item number 17 is an appointed position in the Neighborhood and Community Relations Department, Director, Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs. Item number 18 is a contract amendment with Lockridge Grindle and Noan PLLP, Federal Relations Group for Federal Representation Services. Item number 19 is a gift acceptance of exercise equipment from Anytime Fitness to the Minneapolis Fire Department. Item number 20 is a contract with Hennepin Healthcare Systems to be the sole provider of emergency medical services EMS training programs. Item number 21 is a contract with Hennepin Technical College for training of police cadets. Item number 22 is a contract amendment with Specialized Environmental Technologies for yard wastes, street sweeping, and organics materials processing services. Item number 23 is a contract amendment with Riverview Windows, Inc. for lead remediation work. Item number 24 is a contract amendment with Hennepin County for cost sharing for Minnesota Family Investments Program, Employment and Training Services. Item number 25 is a contract with Northeast Metropolitan School District number 916 to provide youth with accreditation for step-up, internship, and elective summer classes. Item number 26 is agreements with Minnesota Department of Transportation and Minneapolis Parks and Recreation Board for trail, sidewalk, and signal constructions on Industrial Boulevard at I-35W. Item number 27 is a contract amendment with Valley Paving, Inc. for water main offsets. Item number 28 is 2017 Metropolitan Council Livable Communities Demonstration Account and Transit-Oriented Development and Grant Awards. Item number 29 is acknowledgement of receptivity to an Livable Communities Act funding award from in support of the award of Metropolitan Council Livable Communities Local Housing Incentive Account grant funds to the PPL Greenbelt Homes New Construction Project and acceptance of LHIA grant funds for other projects. And item number 30 is procedures for setting compensation levels for the mayor and city council members, and referring to staff an ordinance amending Title Chapter 20 of the Minneapolis Code of Ordinance relating to administration, personnel, amending Articles 2 entitled Payrolls by adding a new section to establish procedures for setting or changing compensation levels for the mayor and city council. And I'll make a motion to move all those items. And we've also been joined by Councilmember Cunningham. Thank you for joining us. And any comments? I see Council Vice Chair Fletcher. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. That was quite a list of items. There's a lot going on there. And part of the reason that I think that's okay to do is that we go through a pretty rigorous procurement process that looks at these. So when we've pressed and asked for details in agenda setting and in preparation for this meeting, I think we found that these are, in general, well-considered items. I think I did get some questions about number 9, the contract with Life Tech Services around emergency medical services, and a question about why we didn't have a public agency engaged, sort of bidding on that work. And in the end, what happened as we pressed on it is that we found that there was an appropriate process followed that we don't want to interfere with in this case. So I don't want to pull it from consent. But what I do want to do is sort of signal that as a new council member, I want to invite procurement to meet with me offline to educate me a little bit about procurement processes so that I can better represent them to people when they're raising questions. And I also think that it would be appropriate to have procurement come and talk about the process that they go through so that the public can better understand how we put work out for bid, how people can make a bid for those projects so that we can encourage the kind of public participation and the kind of broad, diverse participation that we want in bidding for work moving forward. So I appreciate the work that everybody's put into putting these contracts together and sort of making the city operate. And I'm happy to vote in favor of the consent agenda. I just wanted to name that that's an area of work that I think would be appropriate for this committee moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Fletcher. Any other comments? Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to follow up with that. Procurement will be coming to the Peace Committee before the Peace Committee to do an overview of the work that they do. And so we will be digging more into that in March. So I'll be sure to get that out to you about when we will be covering that. With some great questions, I'll pass them along. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Councilmember Cunningham. Any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? The items have been approved. And we have one discussion item, item number 31, which is 2018 Capital Long Range Improvement Committee, CLIC, schedule, rating guidelines, and recommended net debt bond resource levels. And I have staff to discuss it. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chair Warsami and council members. My name is Michael Ablin, and I am the Director of Investments, Capital, and Debt Management for the city. And I also serve as the Executive Secretary of the CLIC Committee, which is the citizen-appointed committee that will be spending a lot of time reviewing capital proposals. I have with me today Jeff Strand, who is the Chair of the CLIC Committee. So at some point, I'm going to invite him up and have him really talk to you in depth more about the CLIC process itself. But the action before you today is basically to kick off the capital budget process. As I speak to you today, there are people in departments and over at the Park Board working on capital project proposals that will be submitted to me, actually, and later to the CLIC Committee. Those are due on April 3rd. So they're working on those diligently as we speak. And basically they get their information from, reviewing the needs of the city, infrastructure that needs repair, et cetera. And they're preparing cost estimates and gathering information to fill out the forms that are then the capital budget requests that are submitted to the CLIC Committee. So the other thing that I wanted to spend a little time with you today is talking about the net debt bond resources that are made available. Those are kind of one of the primary sources of funds for the capital program. They are supported by property tax dollars, and they are probably the primary source of money that the CLIC members consider in making their recommendation regarding limited resources to do more work than we can afford in any given year. So that's part of what the CLIC process does, is determine which ones to move forward with in a recommendation to the mayor and city council. So I'll have Jeff talk about the whole CLIC process. And then the CLIC rating guidelines is an attachment to your request for council action that basically spells out how the CLIC members go about their ratings process, the factors that they consider, and there's points that if you go through that document, it's 9 pages long, and it describes the kinds of things they look at when they're reviewing each of the proposals and how they go about assigning points for different categories of things that they see and hear and gain information from the presenters, etc. So ultimately, the thing I need you to consider today is to approve this process, the timelines, and the net debt bond levels that are then being utilized by the departments and the CLIC process in formulating their recommendation. Okay? Are there any questions for me? Otherwise, I'd like to turn it over to Jeff and have him talk about the CLIC process for you.
I mean, I think this was brought up by this morning in our discussion with Councilmember Cunningham with regards to the net debt bonds and how they work. Yeah, you asked the question. Right? Yeah. So I mean, I think just going over what the term means and how it works, I think would be helpful.
Sure. Chair Warsami and council members, the net debt bond refers to the amount of debt that is outstanding less the resources on hand, hence the net debt. But basically, it's property tax supported debt. So each year, as part of the budget process, on one of the handouts, you'll see the bond redemption levy. So that's the tax levy that gets passed to pay for this kind of debt over time. And then these bonds are the primary source of funding that is then used to pay for, roads and bridges and bike trails and traffic signals and all the sort of general infrastructure that the city utilizes to provide services. It helps pay for, police stations, fire stations, just a lot of things that are not paid for with other revenues like the enterprise funds where we actually assess fees for services and for use of water, et cetera. Those are paid for by enterprise revenues, but then this other stuff for police, fire, general, things that everybody uses here as a resident, they're taxed for that through this bond redemption levy, and that levy is then used to pay for these bonds, which we call net debt bonds, which then go into the capital budget process as a resource. Okay?
Any other questions, council members? All right,
I'll
thank
turn
you.
it over to Jeff, and Jeff will kind of walk you through the CLIC schedule and the timeline and the number of meetings and just sort of what the CLIC members do as they go through this process.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Mrs. Strand.
Thank you, Chair Warsami and council members. And first, I'll apologize. I'm still having some visual acuity issues with my left eye, so I'm not squinting for any reason other than that eyesight issue that's remaining from retina surgery. Thanks for the opportunity to briefly address the council committee today. So the Capital Long Range Improvements Committee, I believe, was established as late as the mid-1950s. So it's been a city advisory body to the mayor and council for many, many decades. The CLIC committee consists of 33 members, 2 per council ward and 7 appointed by the mayor. I'm pleased to work with a very diverse group of residents, and I'm sorry, I'm Jeff Strand, Ward 4 resident, 5100 Thomas North. So the CLIC Executive Committee actually has 6 members and is 50% either members of communities of color or LGBTQ identified persons. The 33-member body meets for a 2-year period between appointments. CLIC is known as a very time-intensive city advisory body. And so I and others do our best to make this a very welcoming committee for all residents, regardless of their backgrounds. But it tends to be a very diverse group and a very dedicated group. So the meetings for this year's schedule are anticipated to begin April 3rd and run through June 26th. typically weekly, bi-weekly meetings of an hour and a half to 2 hour duration, to come up with the body of work that is the CLIC report, which contains both written comments from the Transportation and Human Development task forces, as well as a rating for all of the projects, all the capital budget requests, based on that rating schema that Mr. Abelin alluded to. And that CLIC guidelines are, I believe, before your committee today. I want to highlight a couple of things that were innovations in the past couple of years after the previous chair retired and I was elected chair by my colleagues. That we have for 2 years now had CLIC public input sessions, north and south, to invite additional neighborhood and community comment and input on the capital budget request and process. In addition, there's a formal joint public hearing with the Planning Commission that is scheduled annually. I also just want to point out that the process is quite transparent, and so all of the CLIC reports are available on the city's website, minneapolismn.gov, under the Finance Department. One can go back to the year 2005 for the CLIC reports, as well as the capital budget requests. So I think the process is quite transparent, and I believe the committee members are united to make sure that it is inclusive of all residents. And lastly, in terms of, we did have an opportunity to meet with the Promise Zone Equity Subcommittee with Julianne Learson last October. Reviewed equity concerns with her, and also the recent articles in the Kira newsletter and the St. Paul study on capital equity. So I just want to make sure the council members are aware that, yes, committee members are aware, cognizant of equity considerations. So I hope in a high-level way that has addressed the committee's interest in the CLIC process.
Mr. Strand, is there any questions, Mr. Strand? I have Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Strand and Mr. Abelin. I know an issue that I've brought up now it feels like several years in a row has been around the time when CLIC meets. You mentioned it's an hour and a half to 2 hours. I appreciate the mention around equity with it, and that was really what has been on the forefront of my mind with the schedule. Meeting downtown for an hour and a half or 2 hours during the work week over lunchtime is something that, you know, only folks that are either retired or have a special circumstance where they're able to be away from work that long, or frankly are in professional roles where they have that kind of luxury, are able to attend it. I think that limits the amount of individuals who can participate, and frankly it's been something that when I've talked with my prospective CLIC appointees, it's a conversation that comes up, is the difficulty around scheduling and how it's a very exclusive scheduling constraint that's created. So Mr. Strand, I was wondering if there's been any discussion by the committee itself on that issue. Have they thought about switching to evenings or a schedule that would be more accommodating for individuals of a broader range across the city?
Yes, Chair Warsami and Councilmember Johnson. The committee actually has addressed that a couple of different occasions, learning of the council members' concerns. And in point of fact, the committee members who are currently appointed, when we surveyed the members, it turned out that the bulk of the people found the existing schedule more conducive and convenient to their respective schedules. So personally, I have no issue with evening meetings, other committees. However, we did survey the membership and found that the current schedule was most conducive to those members currently appointed.
So I'm glad there's discussion on that. I do want to point out that's self-selecting though, because for instance, in my case, when I looked at who I was appointing, I made sure that that time would work for them specifically. So I already had to rule out people that didn't have that luxury of being able to get off for several days in a week for a couple hours over lunch and be able to be downtown, let alone if you don't work downtown. I mean, you're adding in, usually an extra, depending on where you work, up to a half an hour each way, probably, if you're considering attending. And so it is very burdensome, I think, schedule-wise, and something I want to point out, and I hope something my colleagues think about as well. I'm not suggesting that, hey, the committee should turn around and change it this year, but I wonder, how do we work towards a more equitable schedule that allows those appointing to really appoint a larger audience or pool of candidates?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, one of the things that came up when we had that discussion with the various CLIC members about where to meet and what time to meet is the need to be centrally located where public transportation comes. So if we were going to, locate in one corner of the city in an evening meeting and there was no public transportation to get to that meeting, it might be convenient for a couple members who live in that general jurisdiction, but it would be really difficult for people from across town to get there. So that sort of became one thing about why City Hall works well, because we have the train that comes right to our doorstep, and the whole Metro transit system basically comes from all neighborhoods and comes downtown. So that ended up being one of the various important factors in why these meetings are held here at City Hall. And then we also have a lot of people like Jeff and others who work downtown, and from their perspective, being able to take off work during a lunch hour and basically get their supervisor's permission to have an extended lunch and meet and make these meetings. Some of those folks said if it was at 6 o'clock at night, I've got obligations with my family, I wouldn't be able to come to those meetings. And if it was across town and I didn't have a bus to get there. And so there's a really a difficult challenge to try and move these meetings somewhere else where there's other things that don't work out for people. So it's difficult. We have tried to get the north and south public meetings to get more community involvement. Those are evening meetings. We've tried to do a few things to try and help get more public participation, but like Jeff said, when we polled the CLIC members, they really felt ultimately that City Hall was still the best choice, and these meetings that start at noon were able to be attended by the most people. So we really did try. We did a full-fledged effort with folks to try and get their input, and that's what the group decided was best for the whole. So.
Well, I appreciate the explanation, and it looks like you're going to say something else, Mr. Strand.
Yes, one more short piece, Chair Warsami and Councilmember Johnson. I will certainly take it upon myself to talk with the other executive committee members, reach out to the city clerk and neighborhood and community relations that works with the open appointments process, see what alternatives. Currently, I did push Mike to have one of the full day sessions weekend versus work day. Committing to a full work day week, business week, can be burdensome on folks. And so
We do have a Saturday.
we have a Saturday and a weekday because we have 2 full day sessions that I didn't mention. But I certainly will address that with the executive committee and happily will reach out to the city clerk in terms of the next open appointments process, in terms of job description, committee responsibilities, willingness to diverge from that schedule. I think we will revisit it when the new committee meets April 3rd.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that commitment. I appreciate the explanation. I certainly have no grievance with having it centrally located downtown. I know there's other locations as well that we could take advantage of after-hour access, but even if it requires changing the cadence or duration of individual meetings and the length of the schedule or other potential adjustments just to make it more accessible, more equitable, I think that would be certainly appreciated, because right now I, as an appointer, feel like, and I'm happy with my appointees, so they shouldn't read into this in any which way because I've got some great people on there, but as an appointer, certainly that's probably my number one consideration talking with people is, hey, by the way, are you in a really fortunate position that you can take off a couple hours in a row during a busy work week? And are you already working downtown and most likely some corporate job, right? Those kind of situations. But then certainly that in other regards limits the perspectives on the committee. So appreciate you listening, appreciate the commitment to have more discussion around it and the explanations.
Thank you, Councilmember Johnson and Councilmember Cunningham.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to name and congratulate the 50% diversity on the committee. I know that, again, it's a very time-intensive committee, and there's a large responsibility that goes with it. And so having had 50% diversity, I just wanted to commend that. And also give a special thanks to Mr. Strand, whom I am very proud to represent here, because he, as somebody that I know, has worked very hard on this committee. And so congratulations on being the chair, and I look forward to seeing your leadership.
All right. Thank you very much, Councilmember Cunningham. Any other questions, my colleague? All right. Thank you, Mr. Abram, and thank you to Mr. Strand for your service and for also coming to present to us today. And I see no further questions. Councilmember Palmisano.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I can do this. I'd like to move approval of this item today.
Thank you very much. The item has been moved for approval. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The item has been approved. Thank you very much. And